Coming to the fifth poem of Emily Dickinson, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, numbered 712. In her poem, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, Emily Dickinson describes a close encounter with death and immortality. She uses personification to portray death and immortality as characters. Her familiarity with them at the beginning of the poem causes the reader to feel at ease with the idea of death. However, as the poem progresses, a sudden shift in tone causes readers to see it for what it really is, cruel and evil. The poem's speaker tells us about death, personified as the Grim Reaper, kindly stopped for her in a carriage, like a taxi driver stopping off to pick up a passenger. Almost immediately, though, we have a paradox. Death, representative of mortality, and the speaker are inside a carriage that also contains immortality, death's mirror opposite. The speaker tells us that they took their time driving to where they were going, passing the school where children were on their break, and fields of grain and the sun, which is symbolically setting in the sky, suggestive of death. The implication is that the poem's speaker and death dwelt in this house, a house of death, for many centuries. Yet all that time has passed more quickly than a single day, back when the speaker first guessed that the horses pulling the cart were facing eternity, that is, the afterlife. As so often with an Emily Dickinson poem, we have a poem spoken by someone who is already dead. One may take it that the speaker has no fear of death. Death is kind, drives with care, and has a formal politeness about it. The most striking feature of this poem is the use of the dash to temporarily pause a sentence or a clause, where the reader takes a fleeting breath before continuing. This tends to isolate a phrase in a manner different to, say, a comma or colon, and is frequently used by Emily Dickinson in most of her poems. There is a regular 4-beat or 3-beat rhythm in each quatrain, which helps reinforce the idea of a steady drive in a horse-drawn carriage. The rhyme scheme is A-B-C-B, each second line being full or slant with the fourth line. What begins in the simple past ends in eternity. Endless life after death, where time has no consequence. Mortality faces eternity. As one reads through, one may note the focus on the passage of life. This could be the speaker's last day on earth. The journey takes in a school where the children gather to work out their futures, seen as a ring or circle. And the grain, subject to the seasonal rounds, stands to gaze as if spellbound in the fields. The daily bread is suspended. The earthly sphere is left. Diurnal rules are being broken as the sun, a fixed star, appears to pass the carriage. And the passenger suddenly feels cold as the light and warmth fade. The imagery is particularly strong at this point. The speaker, a growing ethereal figure, almost spirit-like. To state a few lines, because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too. For his civility, we passed the school where children strove. At recess in the ring, we passed the fields of grazing grain. We passed the setting sun, or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill. For only gossamer, my gown, my tippet, only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then, it is centuries and yet feels shorter than the day. I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. Coming to the sixth poem of Emily Dickinson, My Life Had Stood a Loaded Gun, numbered 751. It is a six-stanza poem that is separated into sets of 4 lines or quatrains. The poem does not have a title and instead goes by either its first line. This was the case for almost all of the poetry she wrote. My life had stood a loaded gun does not conform to one particular pattern of rhyme. Instead, there are moments of half or slant and full rhymes scattered throughout the text. For instance, in the first and last stanzas, the second and fourth lines rhyme. Repetition also plays a major role here, whether that is the repetition of hunting or the textual repetition of and now, also known as anaphora, in the second stanza. Emily Dickinson also makes use of a number of images, the most important of which is the gun. No matter what one sees as the appropriate interpretation of this piece, the gun in question is always going to represent power. They have an inherent danger associated with them, and in this case, it is used as a symbol for the speaker, life, and the power her words hold. Nature also plays an important role in the text. There is a hunted doe, the presence of night, and a reference to Mount Vesuvius. The speaker uses repetition to describe the process of hunting, day in and day out, in the sovereign woods. It is also important to note what hunting itself represents. It is at the same time a destructive sport, a skill, and an outlet for anger. Then there is the doe to consider. It is there as the female focus of the speaker's anger. The poem begins with the speaker stating that her life has existed up as a loaded gun in a corner. Then one day passes where a master comes along and carries her away. This person is likely a man, her husband, who wields much more power in the world than she is allowed to have. Now that she is at his side, more like an accessory or tool than partner. She is taken deeper into the male world. From her new position, she is made to hunt a doe or female deer and is pushed back when she attempts to assert her own opinion. It is clear in the next stanza that anger is building up inside the speaker. She does not give in to it though. She puts on a smiling face, as would be expected of her, and keeps her anger inside. The speaker does express though what would have happened and if she had allowed herself to show her true emotion. Her calm face would have become volcanic, like Vesuvius, and exploded anger over the valley. It is an ambiguous poem open to multiple interpretations, but perhaps the most common deals with the power of anger. The poem contains one of Dickinson's most iconic images, with the speaker being the loaded gun of the title, and the owner functioning as an extended metaphor for the speaker's inner rage. By separating the speaker and the speaker's rage into these two distinct characters, the poem explores the control that rage has over the body. At the same time, though, the poem suggests that rage provides a power that speaker alone does not possess. In other words, the poem suggests the speaker's tendency to get carried away by anger, but also that only through that anger can the speaker feel powerful. This reading takes on further resonance when considering that the anger in the poem is personified as being male. If readers interpret the speaker to a manifestation of Dickinson herself and as such that the speaker is female, then it is possible to take the poem as a specific testament to women's dormant rage and how anger is the only way for the speaker to feel a sense of power in a male-dominated society. The speaker introduces the metaphor of her life as a loaded gun, detailing a meaningless, powerless existence before the appearance of the owner, which in this reading of the poem can be understood as a reference to the speaker's anger. The specific wording of carried away further suggests how much control anger exerts over the speaker, since people are often described as being carried away by intense emotions. This is perhaps subconsciously inspired by Dickinson's use of the ballet verse for this poem, which uses a familiar and hymn-like rhythm. Dickinson's extensive knowledge of the Bible and traditions allowed her to mimic its written conventions, even more effective when providing a possibly sharp critique. Viewed in this light, the enigmatic last stanza could be read as Dickinson's doubt in her faith, unable to fully submit to the extent commanded of a Christian to die for it. Stating a few lines, "My life had stood a loaded gun in corners till a day the owner passed identified and carried me away. And now we roam in sovereign woods, and every time I speak for him, the mountains straight reply. And do I smile such cordial light upon the valley glow, it is as a Vesuvian face had let its pleasure through. And when at night, our good day done, I guard my master's head, it is better than the eider duck's deep pillow, to have shared to foe of his I am deadly foe, none stare the second time, on whom I lay a yellow eye or an emphatic thumb, though I than he may longer live, he longer must than I, for I have but the power to kill without the power to die." Coming to the last poem of Emily Dickinson, number 7th, Rearrange a Wife's Affection, which is numbered 1737. The poet's brain is dislocated, and the verb amputate in the next line is shocking in its implication of female vulnerability to the insensitive male. In the second stanza, it seems the poet has learned through her betrothal that marriage promises little of any value for a woman. Thereafter, she then becomes more detailed in praising her spirit and her clay. Her love never wavered, her trust was entrenched and confined. There was pain involved. Emily Dickinson may have been thinking of a man like Samuel Bowles or Charles Wordsworth as she wrote this, married men, of course, both of them. That would account for the confines and also for the fire through which she remained constant. It might account as well for the anguish she suffered, without anything to soothe the pain and lessen the hurt. The last two stanzas of the poem, though, reveal the poet as not despairing, because she believes in a marriage after death. Not a corpse bride, of course, but a true spiritual union. The poet has borne the burden of a secret and difficult love in secret. No one suspects she refers to her crown of thorns by way of reinforcing her suffering. She, like Jesus, wears a painful crown until death. then she can put on her true beautiful crown. This secret love is a big secret. No doubt there would be plenty of scandal and embarrassment should it be discovered. Consequently, the poet has bandaged it. The bandage covers and hides the secret. It also binds it to her until she dies and can lead it through the grave to her waiting soulmate. The last line implies the soulmate might already be dead, that the poet has been keeping her love alive for 7 years, trusting in a heavenly consummation. Part of the strength of the poem comes from the expulsive B sounds in the first 6 lines. Brain, bosom, bearded, blush, blush. They underscore the intensity of the love. In later lines, we see the love as burdened, the secret as big and bandaged. All are quite strong words. Imagine going through life with a steadfast love for someone, your soulmate. But the love must be kept secret. That is what this poem talks about. The beginning of the poem is blunt, almost explosive. The poet begins from the point of view of a wife. Tamper with her love and affection? No way. They would have to first take out her brain and cut off her breasts. They would have to make her a man to do it. Each of the 4 lines in the first stanza end in exclamation marks. Could Dickinson have been any more emphatic? To state a few lines, rearrange a wife's affection when they dislocate my brain, amputate my freckled bosom, make me bearded like a man, blush my spirit in thy fastness, blush my unacknowledged clay. 7 years of troth have taught thee more than wifehood every May. Love that never leaved its socket, trust entrenched in narrow pain, constancy through fire, avoided, anguish bare of anodyne. Burden born so far triumphant, none suspect me of the crown, for I wear the thorns till sunset, then my diadem put on. Big my secret, but it is bandaged. It will never get away, till the day its weary keeper leads its true the grave to thee. To sum up, Emily Dickinson led a large secluded life in Amherst, New England. Solitude led to a life devoted to reading and writing. She had, however, a number of literary mentors. Her poems were her letters to the world. She had published only 7 poems in her life. They were anonymous publications. It was only after her death her poems were published on a large scale. She made her reputation as one of the most intense, profound, and romantic poet of New England. Her poetry is largely a poetry of rebellion and confession. The poems of Emily Dickinson cover a wide range of topics. In fact, her work does not fit conveniently into any one genre. She is now regarded as an innovative pre-modernist poet. Fewer than a dozen of her nearly 1,800 poems were published during her lifetime. It is true that Emily Dickinson's themes are universal, but her particular vantage points tend to be very personal. She rebuilt her world inside the products of a poetic imagination. This is why some knowledge of her life and her cast of mind is essential for illuminating much of her work. Such knowledge, however, must always be used with caution and tact, for otherwise it can lead to quick judgments, simplifications, and distortions. Understanding her work is helped even more by recognizing some of her fundamental patterns of subject, matter, and treatment, particularly her contrasting attitudes and the ways in which her subjects blend into one another. Particular attention should be given to grasping the sense of a whole sentences, filling in missing elements, straightening out inverted word order, and expanding the sense of telescoped phrases and metaphors. Perhaps most important for understanding Emily Dickinson is the testing of one's conceptions and of the tone or tones of individual poems and relating them to other poems and to one's own emotional ideas and feelings.